What if I told you that a British Army officer went into battle during World War II, armed with a Scottish broadsword, a longbow with arrows and bagpipes, and survived the entire war with multiple confirmed kills using medieval weapons? That Lieutenant Colonel John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, known as Mad Jack, charged at German positions playing Will You Know Come Back Again on his pipes, killed at least one German soldier with a barbed arrow, and led the only recorded longbow kill in modern warfare? That he once captured 42 German soldiers and a mortar crew using only his sword, escaped from a concentration camp by simply walking away, and when the war ended, complained, "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years?" This is the story of Mad Jack Churchill, the officer so insane that even the British Army couldn't control him, so effective that they couldn't court-martial him, and so utterly fearless that German soldiers thought he was supernatural. And the darkest part? He might have been the sanest soldier in the entire war. John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill was born in 1906 in Hong Kong to a civil service family. He was educated at King William's College on the Isle of Man and the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, the training ground for British Army officers. Everything about his early life suggested he would become a conventional, respectable military officer. He didn't. Churchill was bored by conventional military service. After graduating from Sandhurst in 1926, he served briefly in Burma, then resigned his commission in 1936 to pursue a bizarre series of careers. Motorcycle racer. He competed in motorcycle trials and showed considerable talent. Male model. He appeared in several advertising campaigns and fashion shoots, unusual for a former military officer in the 1930s. Film extra. He worked as a stunt performer and extra in several British films, including A Yank at Oxford and The Thief of Baghdad. Newspaper editor. He briefly worked for a Nairobi newspaper. Archery champion. He represented Britain in the World Archery Championships in 1939, placing second with the longbow. This wasn't a traditional military career path. This was a man searching for something. Adventure, challenge, meaning that conventional life couldn't provide. When World War II began in September 1939, Churchill immediately rejoined the British Army. He was 33 years old, technically too old for frontline combat roles, but the war created opportunities for unconventional officers. Churchill requested assignment to commando units, the elite special operations forces the British were forming to conduct raids against German-occupied Europe. His commanding officers initially rejected him. He was too old, too eccentric, too undisciplined for elite forces. But Churchill had an advantage. He was genuinely skilled in combat. His archery championship wasn't just sport. He'd developed lethal accuracy with the longbow. His time in Burma had given him experience with jungle warfare. His personality, fearless to the point of insanity, was exactly what commando operations required. By 1940, Churchill was assigned to Number 2 Commando, later transferring to Number 3 Commando, and eventually commanding Number 2 Commando himself. And he brought his longbow. Mad Jack Churchill went into combat carrying weapons that would have seemed appropriate in the 14th century, not the 20th. The longbow. Churchill carried a traditional English longbow, a 6-foot weapon made of yew, requiring enormous strength to draw fully. The draw weight was approximately 90 to 100 pounds, compared to modern compound bows at 50 to 70 pounds. The arrows were barbed hunting arrows, designed to penetrate and remain lodged in targets. Churchill reportedly carried 12 to 18 arrows in a quiver on his back. Why use a longbow in an era of machine guns and artillery? Churchill's stated reason: any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed. His practical reason: a longbow was silent, psychologically terrifying, and demonstrated contempt for the enemy. It sent a message: I don't even need modern weapons to kill you. The broadsword. Churchill carried a Scottish basket-hilted broadsword, a cavalry sword from the 18th century that he'd acquired from a military museum or private collection. The blade was approximately 36 inches long, designed for slashing and thrusting. He wore it on his left hip, even when carrying modern firearms. British Army regulations technically prohibited officers from carrying non-standard weapons, but Churchill simply ignored these regulations and no one dared order him to stop. The bagpipes. Churchill was an accomplished bagpipe player. He'd learned during his time in Scotland and considered himself a competent piper, though others described his playing as enthusiastic rather than skilled. He carried Highland bagpipes into combat and would play them, before attacks to inspire his men, during attacks while advancing under fire, after successful operations as celebration, sometimes just because he felt like it. The psychological effect on both British and German forces was profound. British soldiers found it simultaneously inspiring and insane. German soldiers found it terrifying. What kind of madman plays bagpipes while being shot at? The firearms. Despite his preference for medieval weapons, Churchill also carried a Thompson submachine gun, grenades, a standard British officer's sidearm. He was pragmatic when necessary, but he preferred to open combat with his longbow, transition to his sword in close quarters, and use firearms only when absolutely required. May of 1940. The first recorded instance of Mad Jack Churchill's combat insanity occurred during the German invasion of France. Churchill was serving as a second-in-command of a commando unit conducting a fighting withdrawal as German forces overran France. Near the town of Lepinette, Churchill's unit was ambushed by a German patrol. A firefight erupted at close range. Churchill, armed with his longbow, drew an arrow, aimed and shot a German soldier through the chest at approximately 30 yards. The German fell, the barbed arrow lodged in his torso, the only documented longbow kill in World War II, and likely the last longbow kill in any modern warfare. Churchill's fellow officers witnessed the shot and reportedly stared in disbelief. Churchill calmly retrieved another arrow and continued engaging Germans until the unit could withdraw. This incident established Churchill's reputation as either brilliantly insane or insanely brilliant. His superiors didn't know whether to court-martial him or promote him. They chose promotion. December 1941. The Vagso Raid. Churchill participated in Operation Archery, a commando raid on German positions in Vagso, Norway. The objective was to destroy German installations, capture prisoners, and demonstrate British offensive capability. As the commandos approached the shore and landing craft, Churchill stood in the bow playing The March of the Cameron Men on his bagpipes, while German machine guns fired at the boats. His commanding officer reportedly shouted, "Get down, you madman!" Churchill's response, "Can't. Haven't finished the tune." When the landing craft hit the beach, Churchill was the first out, sword drawn, charging directly at German positions while still playing his pipes. The Germans, confronted with a sword-wielding officer playing bagpipes and leading charging commandos, reportedly hesitated, giving the British crucial seconds to establish their beachhead. Churchill personally led the assault on the German command post, bursting through the door with his sword drawn and shouting. The German commander surrendered immediately, possibly believing he was being attacked by a lunatic who couldn't be reasoned with or stopped. The raid was a success. Churchill's role was mentioned in dispatches, though official reports carefully avoided mentioning the bagpipes and sword. July 1943. Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. Churchill commanded No. 2 Commando as part of the invasion force. His unit was tasked with capturing the town of Pigoletti and securing the surrounding area. During the night assault, Churchill's unit became separated from the main force and found themselves significantly outnumbered by Italian defenders. Rather than withdraw, Churchill decided to attack. He led approximately 50 commandos in a night assault on an Italian position, defended by over 100 soldiers. The assault was conducted with Churchill playing bagpipes to signal the attack, commandos advancing with fixed bayonets, Churchill personally leading the charge with his sword. The psychological effect was overwhelming. The Italian defenders, hearing bagpipes in the darkness and seeing British commandos charging with a sword-wielding madman at their front, assumed they were facing a much larger force. The Italian position broke. Soldiers fled or surrendered in confusion. Churchill's unit captured 42 Italian soldiers and a mortar crew. all surrendering to a force half their size because they were convinced they were facing supernatural or insane enemies. Churchill later described the incident casually. "I was armed with only my bow and sword, but the Italians very kindly surrendered without requiring me to actually use them extensively." The captured prisoners reportedly told interrogators they surrendered because their commander seemed possessed by demons or mad with battle fury. The bagpipes particularly terrified them. They'd never heard anything like it and assumed it was some kind of war cry signaling an overwhelming attack. September 1943. Salerno. During the Salerno landings in Italy, Churchill's unit was tasked with capturing a German observation post on a hilltop position. The standard approach would have been artillery bombardment, followed by infantry assault. Churchill decided on a different tactic. He would personally infiltrate the position at night, determine the exact German strength and placement, then lead a surprise attack at dawn. He went alone, armed with his sword and a knife, leaving his firearms behind as unnecessarily noisy. Churchill infiltrated the German position in darkness, crawling to within feet of German sentries. He observed their positions, counted their numbers, approximately 15 soldiers, and noted their weapons placement. Then, rather than withdrawing, he decided to attack immediately. Churchill leaped up, sword drawn, and charged the nearest German position while screaming. The Germans, shocked by a sudden attack from within their own perimeter, assumed they'd been infiltrated by a larger force. In the chaos, Churchill killed or wounded several Germans with his sword, drove the rest from their positions, and held the observation post alone until his unit could advance and secure it. His commanding officer, arriving with reinforcements, found Churchill sitting on a German ammunition box, smoking a cigarette, with his sword bloodied and laid across his lap. "Splendid weather for it," Churchill reportedly said. May 1944. Yugoslavia. Churchill was commanding a mixed British-Yugoslav partisan force conducting operations against German forces in the Balkans. During an engagement on the island of Brač, Churchill's force was ambushed by a much larger German unit supported by mortars and artillery. The battle was brutal. Churchill's unit was surrounded and systematically destroyed. Churchill fought desperately, directing fire, treating wounded, and personally engaging German soldiers in close combat. At one point, Churchill was wounded by shrapnel from a mortar blast. Despite his injuries, he continued fighting, using his Thompson submachine gun after losing his sword in hand-to-hand combat. Eventually, with most of his unit dead or wounded and ammunition exhausted, Churchill was knocked unconscious by a mortar blast and captured. The Germans, finding a British officer armed with a sword and bagpipes, were baffled. They initially thought he might be a madman who had wandered onto the battlefield by accident. When Churchill recovered consciousness and identified himself as a British Army lieutenant colonel, the Germans assumed he was lying. No British officer would carry such ridiculous weapons. Churchill was transferred through several POW camps, eventually ending up at Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Not the extermination camp itself, but a special section where high-value prisoners were held. Churchill spent several months in Sachsenhausen, planning escape attempts and generally making himself a nuisance to his captors. In September 1944, Churchill simply walked away. He'd been watching the guard patterns for months, noting that during Allied air raids, the guards would take cover and temporarily abandon some fence sections. During one such raid, Churchill climbed the fence, dropped into the perimeter area outside the prisoner compound, walked through the camp's administrative section looking purposeful. Prisoners in shabby clothes who act confident are often assumed to be workers, and exited through a service gate. He then walked approximately 150 miles through Germany and occupied Poland towards Soviet lines. He was recaptured near the Baltic coast by German forces who were retreating from advancing Soviet armies. Churchill was transferred again, this time to a POW camp in Austria, Stalag 18C. He escaped again. This time, he found a drainage ditch that led under the fence, crawled through it at night, and began walking toward the Alps, intending to cross into Switzerland. He survived for several days walking through the Austrian countryside, avoiding German patrols, until he encountered an American armored column advancing through Austria. The Americans found a bedraggled British officer with a sword strapped to his back, insisting he was Lieutenant Colonel Churchill, and demanding immediate transportation back to his unit so he could resume fighting. The Americans assumed he was shell-shocked or delusional and sent him to a field hospital. After his identity was confirmed and his story verified, which took several days because it seemed completely implausible, Churchill was evacuated to Britain. The war in Europe ended in May 1945, while Churchill was still recovering from his captivity and escapes. He was reportedly furious that the war had ended without him. After recovering from his ordeal, Churchill volunteered for transfer to the Pacific Theater. Japan was still fighting. Churchill wanted back into combat. The British Army, recognizing that Churchill was both extraordinarily effective and completely uncontrollable, sent him to Burma to participate in operations against Japanese forces. Churchill arrived in Burma in summer 1945, expecting to participate in the planned invasion of mainland Japan. He'd already begun planning how to use his commando experience in jungle warfare against Japanese positions when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. World War II was over. Churchill's reported response: "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years." This quote, recorded by several sources, reveals something profound about Churchill's psychology. For him, the war wasn't about defeating fascism or protecting civilization. It was about the experience of combat itself, the intensity, the challenge, the proving ground where courage and skill determined survival. He'd found meaning in war that he'd never found in peacetime. Now the war was over, and he didn't know what to do with himself. After World War II, Mad Jack Churchill struggled to adjust to peacetime. He took several conventional military postings, but found them unbearably boring. Garrison duty, administrative work, and peacetime military routine held no appeal for someone who'd charged machine gun nests with a sword. Post-war adventures. In 1946, Churchill participated in a military expedition to Palestine during the British Mandate period. He was involved in several skirmishes with Jewish resistance forces. In 1948, Churchill was aboard the Palestine-bound passenger steamer Athenia when it was bombed by Jewish insurgents. He helped evacuate passengers and reportedly enjoyed the experience immensely. In the 1950s, Churchill became an instructor at the Land Air Warfare School in Australia, teaching jungle warfare techniques he'd learned in Burma and unconventional tactics he'd developed during his commando service. The surfing colonel. In his 50s, Churchill discovered surfing. He became one of the first people to ride a surfboard on the River Severn's tidal bore, a wave that forms when tides push up the river. Until his 70s, Churchill would regularly ride the Severn bore, earning local fame as the eccentric former officer who surfed in full suit and tie. Hobbies and interests. Churchill maintained his archery skills throughout his life. He continued playing bagpipes to the annoyance of neighbors. He designed and built model steam engines as a hobby. He never fully adjusted to peacetime. In interviews late in his life, he acknowledged that the war years had been the most fulfilling of his existence, not because of the politics, but because of the intensity and purpose combat provided. Churchill retired from the British Army in 1959 with the rank of lieutenant colonel. He died in 1996 at age 89, having outlived nearly everyone who'd fought alongside him. Mad Jack Churchill's story raises fascinating questions about courage, sanity, and what warfare does to human psychology. Was Churchill actually insane? By conventional definitions, probably not. He was highly functional, capable of leading men effectively, tactically competent, and able to adapt to changing situations. His use of unconventional weapons wasn't random insanity. It was psychologically calculated to intimidate enemies and inspire his own troops. But he was certainly operating outside normal parameters of rationality. Charging machine gun positions with a sword isn't tactically sound behavior. It worked for Churchill because he was lucky, skilled, and so unexpected that enemies didn't know how to respond. Did his tactics actually work? The evidence suggests yes. Churchill's units accomplished their objectives. His unconventional methods created psychological advantages that conventional tactics couldn't match. The bagpipes and sword weren't just eccentricity, they were psychological warfare tools that made him seem supernatural or insane to enemies, causing hesitation that created tactical advantages. What does Churchill reveal about warfare? Perhaps most significantly, Churchill demonstrates that war creates space for individuals who don't fit peacetime society. In civilian life, Churchill was directionless, bouncing between careers, unable to find purpose. In war, his aggression, fearlessness, and unconventional thinking became assets rather than liabilities. War provided structure for his need for intensity and purpose that peacetime couldn't offer. When the war ended, he struggled because he'd lost the one environment where he functioned optimally, the ethics of celebrating Mad Jack. Churchill killed people. He led operations that resulted in deaths. He participated in warfare that, while against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, justified causes, still involved human suffering. Should we celebrate someone who loved combat and regretted war's end? This is complicated. Churchill fought for a just cause against genuine evil. His courage was real. His leadership saved lives by accomplishing objectives quickly with minimal casualties to his own troops. But his disappointment when the war ended reveals someone who valued the experience of combat more than the cause. And that's troubling. Mad Jack Churchill represents something we don't quite know how to process: the warrior who loves war itself. Most military heroes are framed as reluctant warriors, brave people who fought because duty demanded it, but who would have preferred peace. Churchill was different. He fought because he loved it. He thrived in combat. He missed it when it ended. This makes him simultaneously admirable and disturbing. Admirable because his courage was genuine, his skills were real, and his effectiveness in combat saved lives and accomplished important military objectives. Disturbing because his attitude toward war as adventure, as sport, as the most fulfilling experience of his life sits uncomfortably with how we prefer to remember World War II. We want to remember the war as a necessary struggle against evil, fought by heroes who did their duty and then gratefully returned to peace. Churchill reminds us that some people loved the war, not its causes or consequences, but the experience itself. And we don't know what to do with that truth. Picture a British officer standing in the bow of a landing craft as it approaches a beach defended by German machine guns. He's playing bagpipes. He has a sword strapped to his back. He has arrows in a quiver. And he's playing the March of the Cameron Men while bullets snap past his head. Is this courage or insanity? The answer is probably both. And that's what makes Mad Jack Churchill's story so compelling. He embodied contradictions that warfare creates but peacetime can't sustain. In 1996, when Jack Churchill died at age 89, his obituary struggled to capture who he'd been. Eccentric British officer doesn't quite do it justice. War hero is accurate but incomplete. The man who fought World War II with medieval weapons is memorable but misses the deeper strangeness. Perhaps the best description is simply this: Mad Jack Churchill was a warrior born into the wrong century, who found the one war where his particular brand of insanity was exactly what was needed, who thrived in circumstances that destroyed others, and who never quite forgave the world for ending the fight. He charged machine guns with a sword. He played bagpipes under fire. He killed with a longbow. He escaped from concentration camps by walking away. And when the war ended, he wished it hadn't. If this story fascinated you, if it made you think about courage and insanity, about warriors who love war, about the thin line between heroism and madness, hit that subscribe button. Mad Jack Churchill's story is real. Every detail is documented. It happened. And we still don't quite know what to make of it. Except this: when the bagpipes started playing and the sword came out, Germans knew they were facing something beyond normal warfare. They were facing Mad Jack, and that was terrifying.